How is your week treating you so far?
Couldn't be better. Ready to get into this. You know, I love when you bring the tough topics.
Oh, we've definitely got a meaty one today. But hang on real quick before we dive into the serious, brainy stuff. Got to give a shout out to my buddy, Micky. This guy, he's got a YouTube channel called Mickytolife. Seriously, if you need a good laugh, you got to check it out. It's just, It's hilarious. Pure gold.
Mickytolife.
Okay, commercial break over.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm Joe, and as always, I've got Sunny here with me.
Now, let's switch gears to something that's, well, maybe less laugh out loud funny, but incredibly important. And it's something you've brought to our attention with all the sources you sent over. Dementia on a global scale. The silent killer.
That's right. And thanks again to you for sharing all that data. We've got info on how common dementia is in different places, what might be causing it, and crucially, what might help prevent it. It's a big puzzle, really, a global one.
Exactly. So our mission today, and you're part of it just by listening, is to really unpack this. What is dementia, actually? How's it hitting people in different countries? What are the key things, the absolute must-knows? And maybe most importantly, what can we actually do about it?
Sounds like a plan.
So let's start right at the beginning. Lay it on us. What exactly is dementia?
Okay, so fundamentally, dementia isn't like one specific disease. It's more of an umbrella term.
An umbrella term?
Yeah, it describes a collection of symptoms. Think of it as what happens when the brain gets damaged by diseases, like Alzheimer's or after a stroke, in a way that affects cognitive functions. We're talking memory, thinking, orientation, understanding things, calculation, learning capacity, language, judgment.
Wow, so it's pretty wide-ranging.
It is, and it's usually chronic or progressive. It impacts your mood, emotional control, behavior, motivation. Importantly, it's more than just those occasional senior moments we joke about. It gets serious enough that it really interferes with a person's ability to manage daily life.
Right, so it's not just misplacing your keys, it's fundamentally changing how someone functions.
Exactly.
And looking at the global picture, how big of a problem is this? You mentioned it's growing.
It's a huge public health challenge, and yeah, it's growing, mainly because populations worldwide are aging. People are living longer, which is great, obviously.
Of course.
But age is the biggest known risk factor for dementia. So as the proportion of older people increases, so does the number of people living with dementia. We're talking tens of millions globally.
Tens of millions. That's staggering. Can we zoom in a bit? What if the numbers look like in specific places based on the sources you sent?
Yeah, let's look at some examples. Starting here in the U.S., the 2024 estimates suggest around 11% of people aged 65 and over have Alzheimer's or another dementia. That translates to roughly 6.9 million people just in that age group, focusing specifically on Alzheimer's.
11%. 1 in 9 older adults. Wow. Okay, what about across the Pacific, say Japan?
Japan's interesting. The 2022 data showed about 12% of those 65 and older with dementia. That's around 4.43 million people. But the projection is what's really eye-opening.
Go on.
They estimate that by 2060, the rate could climb to nearly 18% of their 65-plus population. That'd be over 6 million people.
Whoa, almost 1 in 5 older people. That seems really high, especially for Japan. You always hear about their healthy, traditional diet, long lifespans.
Exactly. It seems counterintuitive, and we'll definitely dig into why that might be. But first, let's look at Taiwan.
Okay, Taiwan. What are we seeing there?
Their 2024 figures estimate about 8%, nearly 7.99% to be precise, of those over 65 had dementia. That's around 350,000 registered cases currently. Yeah. And like Japan, they're expecting that number to rise significantly, maybe hitting 470,000 by 2031.
So lower than Japan, but still a substantial number and growing.
Right. And one statistic from Taiwan that really stood out in the courses was the rate in long-term care facilities. It's incredibly high, something like 87% of residents.
87%. That speaks volumes about the burden on the care system.
It really does.
Okay, how about Europe? Let's cross the globe again.
Let's look at Germany. Data from 2022 indicated about 6.9% of the 65-plus population had dementia, which was around 1.8 million people in 2021.
Okay, bit lower again.
Yeah. And the UK in 2024 is estimated to be around 7 to 8% of those over 65. That's close to 1 million people, about 982,000, with projections hitting 1.4 million by 2040.
So similar rates in the UK and Germany, roughly.
Seems like it. In France, based on 2018 data, reported about 1.23 million people with dementia overall, though the source didn't give us a specific 65-plus percentage rate to compare directly.
Okay, so big numbers pretty much everywhere. But that Japan figure, that 12% potentially rising to 18%, it really sticks out.
Yeah.
You mentioned the seeming contradiction with their healthy image. What's going on there? Let's unpack that puzzle.
Yeah, it definitely warrants a closer look, and it shows just how complex dementia is. First off, while the traditional Japanese diet gets a lot of praise, and rightly so.
Right, lots of fish, veggies, soy.
Exactly. But Japan has seen a pretty significant dietary shift, especially in recent decades. There's been a big increase in Western-style foods, more high-sugar, high-fat, processed stuff.
Ah, the westernization effect.
Precisely. And this has led to rising rates of obesity and, crucially, type 2 diabetes. The adult diabetes rate in Japan is around 11.8%, which is quite high.
And diabetes is linked to dementia risk.
Yes, significantly.
Yeah.
Both obesity and diabetes are major risk factors for both Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia. So these newer dietary habits could be counteracting the benefits of the traditional diet, especially as those generations age.
That makes a lot of sense. So diet is one piece. What else?
Another huge factor seems to be hypertension, high blood pressure. The sources indicated that over 60% of Japanese adults over 50 have hypertension.
60%? That's massive.
It is. But here's the kicker. Only about 20–30% of those individuals actually have their blood pressure under control.
Only 20–30% compared to
the U.S., for instance, where control rates are more like 50–60%. That's a big difference. And uncontrolled hypertension is a primary driver of vascular dementia.
vascular dementia. That's the one related to blood flow problems in the brain, right?
Exactly. Strokes, mini strokes, damage to blood vessels. And vascular dementia accounts for a larger proportion of dementia cases in Japan, maybe 20–30% compared to what we typically see in Europe or the U.S. So poor blood pressure control is likely a major contributor to their high overall rate.
Wow. Okay, so dietary changes plus a major issue with controlling blood pressure. Anything else about Japan's situation?
Well, there's the demographic reality. Japan has one of the oldest populations in the world.
Right. Extreme aging and longevity.
Yeah, in 2023, nearly 29% of their population was over 65. And the risk of dementia climbs steeply with age. Once you hit your early 80s, the risk is around 15%. And over 85, it's more than 30%.
So having a much larger proportion of people in those very high-risk age groups automatically pushes the overall prevalence rate up.
Exactly. It's partly simple math. More very old people means more dementia cases, statistically.
Makes sense. Are there other, maybe less obvious factors?
A few others mentioned in the sources. One is potentially higher diagnosis rates. Japan has a robust healthcare system, good screening. They might just be better at identifying and reporting cases compared to places where it might be underdiagnosed.
So they're finding more of the cases that exist.
Possibly. Then there are factors like potentially lower average educational attainment in some older cohorts, especially women, which can affect cognitive reserve. Also, increased sedentary lifestyles due to urbanization, maybe rising social isolation, and even the traditional high-salt diet is sometimes discussed as a potential factor, though the evidence there is more complex.
Okay, that paints a much clearer picture for Japan. Lots of interacting factors. Now let's swing back to Taiwan. Their rate was around 8%. Still significant, but lower than Japan. What are the key drivers there?
There are definitely similarities, but also some differences. Like Japan, Taiwan has a rapidly aging population and increasing longevity, so that demographic pressure is there too.
Okay, aging is a factor everywhere.
Right. And similar to Japan, Taiwan has a pretty good healthcare system, leading to high medical diagnosis and reporting rates. They use cognitive screening tools quite widely, apparently.
So again, they might be catching more cases. What about the underlying health issues?
This is where we see a lot of parallels with Japan, unfortunately. Cardiovascular risk factors are really prevalent. High blood pressure affects 50–60% of older Taiwanese adults. And like Japan, control rates are quite low. Maybe only 30–40% have it managed.
That blood pressure issue again.
Yep. And high rates of diabetes, too, around 20–25% in the elderly population. Add in high cholesterol, heart disease, cerebrovascular disease. It's a similar picture of vascular health challenges contributing to dementia risk.
It sounds like those underlying conditions, blood pressure, diabetes, are just critical.
Absolutely critical. Then looking at lifestyle in Taiwan, we see similar trends. An increasing westernization of the diet, concerns about insufficient exercise, and relatively high smoking rates, particularly among men.
So lifestyle shifts mirroring Japan's.
To some extent, yes. Education levels in older groups, especially women, might also play a role in cognitive reserve, similar to the point made about Japan. And they're seeing issues with increasing social isolation and stress. Interestingly, rates seem to be higher in rural areas within Taiwan.
Wonder why that is. Maybe access to care or social opportunities?
Could be a mix of factors. One interesting genetic point from the sources. Taiwanese populations apparently have a lower frequency of the main Alzheimer's risk gene, AP180, compared to Western populations.
Oh, so genetically they might have a lower baseline risk for Alzheimer's?
Potentially. But it seems the environmental and lifestyle factors, the high rates of vascular risk factors, dietary changes, etc., are likely outweighing any potential genetic protection.
Fascinating. So lifestyle and managing health conditions really seem to be the dominant forces.
It certainly looks that way based on this information. And just for context, in Taiwan, the most common type is Alzheimer's, making up almost 57% of cases, followed by vascular dementia at nearly 23%.
Okay, that gives us a good handle on the what and where. We see dementia as a global issue, numbers vary, but common themes like aging, vascular health, and lifestyle pop up repeatedly. So, thinking about all this, what's the absolute most important thing you think we need to understand about dementia if you had to boil it down?
That's a great question. I think the single most crucial takeaway, the message that needs to cut through, is that dementia is not an inevitable consequence of getting older.
Right. Say that again, not inevitable.
Not inevitable. Yes, age is the biggest risk factor, we can't deny that, but it's not a guarantee. It's not just part of normal aging, like getting gray hair. It's caused by diseases of the brain.
Okay, that's actually really hopeful. Because if it's not inevitable,
then there are things we can potentially influence. The real power lies in understanding and acting on the modifiable risk factors, the things we can change.
Modifiable risk factors. Okay, what are the big ones the sources highlighted?
Several key areas emerged. Firstly, our psychological and social well-being. Things like chronic stress, depression, and particularly loneliness and social isolation. One source mentioned that isolation could increase dementia risk by around 30%.
30%, just from being isolated. Wow.
It's a significant link. It makes you think about social structures, community engagement, maybe differences between cultures, although loneliness is becoming a global issue.
Definitely food for thought. Connection matters. What about physical health stuff?
Absolutely. Physiological factors are huge. We already touched on the big ones. Uncontrolled high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, obesity. These chronic conditions damage blood vessels, including those in the brain, contributing heavily to vascular dementia and also increasing Alzheimer's risk.
And you mentioned the U.S. has higher obesity rates, which likely plays a role here.
Exactly. And while genetics do play a part, like that APOE4 gene we mentioned, whose prevalence varies across populations, these modifiable health conditions seem to have a massive impact overall.
Okay, so managing those conditions is paramount. We also talked about diet. How significant is that?
Diet is incredibly significant. The evidence strongly points towards protective effects from certain dietary patterns. The Mediterranean diet, for example, lots of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, fish, healthy fats like olive oil was linked to an 11–30% lower risk in some studies.
That's a decent reduction.
It is. And interestingly, the traditional Japanese diet, despite the recent shifts we discussed, also showed protective effects in studies focusing on those traditional patterns, maybe around a 21% risk reduction.
So plant-forward, healthy fats, fish. That seems to be the common thread.
Pretty much. And this contrasts sharply with diets high in processed foods, saturated fats, sugar, the typical westernized diet, which appear to increase risk. It's not just about avoiding bad stuff, but actively choosing the good stuff.
Makes sense. Eat well to think well. What about moving our bodies? Exercise.
Another massive one. Regular physical activity is consistently shown to be protective. We're not necessarily talking marathon running either. Regular moderate exercise, brisk walking, swimming, cycling, was linked to a potential 38% reduction in the risk of cognitive decline and a 28% reduction in dementia risk itself.
38% reduction in cognitive decline. That's huge.
It really is. Exercise benefits blood flow, reduces inflammation, maybe even stimulates growth factors in the brain. It's powerful stuff.
Okay, so it's not inevitable, and we have real power through managing health conditions, eating well, staying connected, and exercising. This is actually feeling less daunting now.
That's the goal. Understanding the potential for prevention is key.
All right, so let's pivot to that. Based on everything we've discussed and the recommendations from sources like the Lancet Commission, WHO, the Taiwan Alzheimer's Disease Association, let's get practical. Let's summarize the key prevention strategies. What can you, listening right now, actually start doing?
Okay, let's break it down into actionable areas. First and foremost, maintain cardiovascular health. This is absolutely foundational.
Meaning?
Meaning actively manage your blood pressure. Know your numbers, work with your doctor. The general target is often below 140/90, though it might be slightly adjusted for older adults. And watch the salt. Reducing intake to less than 5 grams a day helps.
Got it. Blood pressure control, less salt. What else for heart health?
Manage diabetes effectively. Aim for an HbA1c level below 7%, mainly by reducing refined sugars and high glycemic foods. Control your cholesterol levels and maintain a healthy weight, a BMI typically between 18.5 and 24. This often means cutting back on high fat, especially saturated and trans fat foods.
Okay, so BP, blood sugar, cholesterol, weight, the core 4 sounds like.
Pretty much. Get them checked regularly.
Okay.
Next big area. Adopt a healthy diet.
We touched on this, Mediterranean style.
Yeah, or something similar that emphasizes vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, fish, nuts, and using healthy fats like olive oil. Specifically, try to increase omega-3 fatty acids. Aim for 2-3 servings of fatty fish like salmon or mackerel per week.
And limit the bad stuff.
Definitely. Cut down on high-sugar foods and drinks, high-fat processed foods, red meat. Think about eating more antioxidant-rich foods, too. Berries, dark leafy greens, nuts, maybe even green tea.
Good tips. Any specific advice for, say, Taiwanese listeners based on their traditional diet?
The sources suggested being mindful of sodium in some traditional fermented foods while still getting the benefits of fermented foods and focusing on increasing whole grain intake.
Nice. Okay, diet covered. What about movement?
Regular exercise. Aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity per week. That's like 30 minutes, 5 days a week. Brisk walking, cycling, swimming, dancing, whatever, get your heart rate up a bit.
Then not just cardio, right?
Right. Include strength training 2-3 times a week using weights, resistance bands, or even your own body weight. And don't forget balance and flexibility exercises like yoga or Tai Chi, especially as you get older.
Good mix. Any caveats?
Just the usual advice. Start slowly.
Smart. Okay, heart, diet, exercise. What else keeps the brain healthy?
Staying cognitively active. Keep that brain working. Engage in lifelong learning. Read, do puzzles, play strategic games, learn a new skill or language, take a class. Challenge yourself mentally.
Use it or lose it, basically.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Build that cognitive reserve. And alongside that, promote mental health and social engagement.
We talked about isolation being a risk.
Exactly. So actively combat it. Participate in community activities. Maintain connections with family and friends. Join clubs. Find ways to stay engaged with others.
And manage stress.
Yes, manage stress levels through things like mindfulness, meditation, or hobbies. Seek help for depression or anxiety if needed. Mental health is brain health. And prioritize good sleep. Aim for 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep per night.
Sleep is so underrated. Okay, anything we should actively avoid?
Definitely. Avoid harmful habits. Top of the list, quit smoking. Smoking damages blood vessels and increases risk significantly.
Especially important given those high rates in Taiwanese men you mentioned.
Absolutely. Also, limit alcohol consumption to moderate levels or avoid it altogether. And protect your head. Take precautions to prevent head injuries, like wearing helmets.
Good reminders. Is there anything else on the prevention checklist?
Regular health checks are key to catching things early. That means screening for those risk factors we talked about: blood pressure, glucose, cholesterol, weight.
Stay on top of the numbers.
Right. Consider annual cognitive screening if you're over 50, especially if there's a family history. Talk to your doctor about it. And importantly, address sensory issues. Get hearing and vision checked regularly and use aids if needed. Hearing loss in particular is increasingly linked to dementia risk.
Huh. Hearing loss too. Interesting.
Yeah, it affects brain stimulation and social interaction. Also, some emerging research is looking into factors like air pollution exposure and even gut health, but the recommendations there are still developing.
Always more to learn. So when's the best time to really start focusing on all this prevention stuff? Is it ever too late?
It's never too late to adopt healthier habits, but the evidence suggests prevention is most effective when started in middle age, think 40s and 50s. That's when some of the underlying brain changes might begin, long before symptoms appear.
Okay, middle age is the prime time to build those healthy foundations. But let's be realistic. If you do all this, is it a guarantee against dementia?
No, unfortunately, there are no absolute guarantees. Genetics play a role, other factors we don't fully understand yet. But implementing these strategies can significantly reduce your risk. Estimates vary, but potentially by 30–40%. That's a substantial reduction.
That is substantial. It puts a lot of power back in our hands.
That's the message. Proactive health management makes a difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so for you listening, let's wrap this up. The key takeaways seem pretty clear. Take care of your heart health, blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, weight. Eat a brain-healthy diet like the Mediterranean style. Move your body regularly with a mix of activities. Keep your mind active and stay socially connected. Ditch harmful habits like smoking, limit alcohol, protect your head, and get regular checkups, including for hearing and vision.
That's a great summary, and maybe a final thought. While it's a complex condition, research is constantly advancing. Taking control of the factors we can influence is incredibly empowering. Don't hesitate to explore the links we'll put in the show notes if you want to dive deeper into any of this.
Fantastic advice. Well, this has been incredibly informative. Thank you for breaking it all down for us and for you listening. We always learn so much doing these deep dives. Let us know what resonated most with you.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of those brains.